Thank you for the click. My name is Luxeley, coming off the to-do list, a first impression and review of the Retribution Paladin in the BFA beta. Keep in mind, this is not intended to be a guide or a how-to kind of video. This is simply a first impression video, and it's supposed to serve as a benchmark for where the Retribution Paladin stands in several different categories right here and now in the BFA beta. And those 6 categories are single target damage, AOE damage, crowd control, survivability, which is a mix of both healing and defenses, mobility, and the last category is what I call utility. Now, when I talk about utility, I'm not talking about the overall value that you may or may not bring to a group. In other words, you got great damage or you have great single AOE damage. The bottom line is, when I talk about utility, I'm talking about things that your class brings to a group that benefits the group in one way or another that other classes or most other classes don't bring. I've graded things with heavy emphasis on 2 different factors. One is each particular category improved from Legion, and 2, how does each category compare with melee DPS or even range DPS? Because the reality is, if you're in a Mythic Dungeon group or an RBG group and you're not bringing the necessary utility to the group, there's a possibility that the leader is going to find someone who will. So how does Retribution Paladin compare with other DPS? I've graded things on a scale of 1 through 5, 1 meaning somewhere along the line, we really should expect or need to have some kind of a buff. 5 meaning somewhere along the line, we really are a bit overpowered and probably could use some kind of nerf. In the middle, at number 3, we're splitting the baby and giving a very fair grade, a very average grade for any given category. Single target damage. In the other first impression videos, I built up suspense, waited until the end of the segment before I revealed or evaluated the category with a particular rating. Not the case here with Rets. I'm doing things in reverse. I've played at least 2 full levels of every DPS spec in the BFA beta, with the exception of 3, Frost Mages, Enhancement Shaman, and Outlaw Rogues. Leveling on a beta, in my opinion, is one of the more fair ways of judging the performance of a spec, especially if you're comparing them amongst each other. Here's why. The eye levels are the same. The basic gear is pretty basic and similar. No extravagant trinkets, no enchants, no gems, no passive buffs from Azeroth armor. Everything is pretty much an even playing field. Everybody starts out of the gate pretty equal. From my experience of playing Rets on a BFA beta, or even playing a different class and often seeing some random player pop out of nowhere and 1 or 2 shot a mob, usually that player's a Ret by the way, I gotta give Rets a solid 5 with regard to single target damage. Yes, Demonology Warlocks, MM Hunters, Arms Warriors all give Rets a challenge for King of the DPS Hill, but I think Rets are the single best DPS out there with regard to single target damage. That places Rets in line for a nerf, or does it really? Blizzard's been a bit kooky with buffs and nerfs throughout Legion. Buffs tended to be understated, nerfs tended to be overstated. I can't predict the future. And believe me, if I could, I'd be more focused on picking winning horses and winning lottery numbers. The bottom line, if you main a Ret, you probably want a buff. If you don't, you probably want a nerf. Rather than be divisive and start up a big discussion, I'd rather explore why Ret damage is, and let's put it this way, let's say arguably, Ret damage is among the top 3 in single target damage on the BFA beta. This is a good news, bad news sort of thing. First, the bad news. Only a handful of specs have been tuned for damage. Ret is not one of them. The good news. The mastery has changed, it's improved, it's more straightforward, and it offers a greater impact. Here's Legion's mastery. Judgment damage was increased by X percentage, and judgment damage increased the damage of holy power spenders by Y%. All depends on what kind of mastery you have, how much you have. Talents affected by judgment, like Greater Judgment, hit 2 additional targets, and Judgment of the Light, which was more or less a heal. More info on the loss of those 2 abilities in the AOE and Survivability categories, but both of them are gone. The artifact trait, Judge Unworthy, is gone as well. Here's what Judge Unworthy did in Legion. When you deal damage to a target afflicted with Judgment, it has a 50% chance to spread to a nearby target. Pretty huge there. That's gone. BFA's Retribution Mastery, very simple, very straightforward, unbelievably direct. Holy damage is increased by Z percentage. Baseline abilities dealing holy damage include Judgment, Divine Storm, and Templar's Verdict. By the way, Judgment in BFA generates 1 holy power. Didn't do that in Legion. I think it's a very good change. I always believe Judgment should generate holy power. I believe once upon a time it did a long time ago. Talents dealing holy damage include Execution Sentence, Hammer of Wrath, Consecration, and Justicar's Vengeance. Execution Sentence is no longer a dot like it was in Legion and BFA. The damage is instant. Hammer of Wrath is an old ability coming back in BFA and acts like a finisher with a 30-yard range. The ability is activated when the target is either below 20% health or Avenging Wrath is active. Incidentally, none of the talents that deal holy damage are on the same tier, which means you can choose all of them if you want to. That may change, that may not change. Judgment, which is baseline, and Execution Sentence, which is a talent, both of those abilities increase your holy damage by 25% and 20% respectively. To be more specific, Judgment increases damage of holy power spenders, basically Divine Storm and Templar's Verdict. They both deal holy damage. The Ret Artifact on Use ability, Wake of the Ashes, is now a tier 60 talent, which is better than nothing because there are some classes that completely lost their on-use artifact ability. This ability is essentially copy and paste from Legion with one exception. The CD is 45 seconds as opposed to 30 seconds. Inquisition is an old ability coming back in BFA. The talent consumes up to 3 holy power to increase your damage and haste by 8%. Lasts 15 seconds per holy power. Smart opportunity-seeking players might be thinking, wow, I can stack that up with the talent Crusade. Unfortunately, you can't. Inquisition as well as Crusade happen to be on the same tier. AOE damage. Divine Storm is your returning baseline AOE. Always fun and engaging looking at the animation. Matter of fact, the majority of Red animations are pretty damn good. I find them very engaging, very interesting. The artifact trait, Judge Unworthy, is gone. Here's what Judge Unworthy did in Legion. Damage to a target afflicted with Judgment had a 50% chance to spread to other nearby targets. The talent Righteous Verdict no longer increases Divine Storm damage by 10%, but it still increases. Well, there's a similar talent. It's a different name, but it's a talent that increases the damage of Templar's Verdict by 15% as opposed to 20%. That should have been in a single target damage section, don't you think? Oh well. Moving over to the talent tree, Holy Wrath and Divine Hammer are both gone. In Legion, Holy Wrath dealt 200% of the Paladin's missing health. Blizzard quickly nerfed that for players to 35%, up to 120% of the Paladin's max health and damage. Divine Hammer replaced Blade of Justice, dealt holy damage instead of physical damage, and happened to be a melee range sort of AoE. Once again, both of these talents are now gone. Consecration, holy talent and protection talent, and once upon a time a red talent. Well, guess what? It's coming back. It's returning as an AoE talent, does holy damage to enemies who enter that particular area. 20-second CD generates 1 holy power and lasts 6 seconds. In Legion, Consecration did not generate holy power and lasted 12 seconds rather than 6 seconds. Obviously, Wake of Ashes is single target and AoE, but unfortunately the former artifact on use ability is on the same tier as Consecration, so you can't take them both. One final thought about AoE damage, Shield of Vengeance, a defensive ability on a 2-minute cooldown, also inflicts holy damage equal to the amount of damage you take to nearby targets. If you recall, your new mastery is a multiplier of holy damage. Shield of Vengeance will benefit from mastery buffs as well as the talent Execution Sentence. I'm not particularly thrilled with AoE damage from Rets here. I give AoE damage a 2.5. I think there is quite a bit of room for improvement here. Crowd control. Rets aren't very well known for their crowd control, but they can be very dangerous, especially with a very carefully placed and timely stun. You can not only be dangerous, you can pretty much make yourself unstoppable if you throw Divine Shield into the mix. It's a pretty simple combo. Hammer of Justice, Avenging Wrath, Divine Shield, and a player can be introduced to the WoW afterlife in a snap. Works even better with additional CC placed on a teammate. If that's the case and you have somebody working with you, you don't necessarily even need to put Divine Shield into that equation. Other than that lethal combo, though, there isn't much else in Ret's bat utility belt here. Hand to hindrance, decent slow, 70% speed reduction with a fair 30-second CD. Of course, there's rebuke. It's interrupt, but then again, every single melee possesses an interrupt, and a few melee classes like Demon Hunters and DKs possess a better interrupt because they have more range. The rest of the Ret CC package here can be found on tier 45, obviously talent choices. You can basically put Fist of Justice on steroids by reducing the cooldown with Fist of Justice. Repentance, a pretty good incapacitate. Unfortunately, though, it does have a cast time, which can be kind of problematic for melee, but it's on a short CD, so, and it DRs with a lot of things that you really wouldn't want it to DR with. And then, of course, there's Blinding Light, which is a pretty decent CC here, but the cooldown is kind of long. So this is a prime example of where and when a lack of utility in CC comes into effect in WoW. In Legion, as well as Warlords of Draenor the Fun, we've seen ability pruning work its disastrous magic. If you're a PvEer, Mythic Dungeons, raiding, etc., the reality is a lack of utility, a lack of CC doesn't hurt you as much as it does in PvP. PvP has been a huge casualty of these vast rounds of ability pruning, and I expect more here in BFA, unfortunately. Here's the reason why I'm throwing this criticism out there. Some classes, particularly Hunters and Warlocks, have received more baseline CC and utility, yet a class like Ret hasn't, and matter of fact, the majority of the classes haven't. Logically speaking, this stretches the boundaries of the haves and have-nots on the PvP side of the game. An argument can and really should be made for Rets to have either Repentance or Blinding Light baseline. Overall, I give Rets a 2 for CC, and I gotta be straightforward here and say, if not for that lethal combination I mentioned earlier, I'd give Rets a 1 for CC. Something really needs to be fixed here. Survivability. Greater Blessing of Kings and Wisdom return. Both abilities greatly add to the Paladin's survivability. Both abilities can also boost the survivability of an arena partner like a rogue, a mage, shadow priest, and that basically tends to be a positive for the overall group. The beautiful thing here, this is a choice. It's your choice. Give it to yourself or give it as a Christmas gift to someone else. The choice is yours. Divine Shield returns, however, the talent Divine Intervention, a Paladin-friendly neighborhood auto bubble, and a 20% cooldown reduction is gone. The good news, something better slips in place, Unbreakable Spirit. It reduces the cooldown of Divine Shield, Shield of Vengeance, and Lay on Hands by 30%. Obviously, the long-time Paladin hallmark, Lay of Hands, returns and offers tremendous survivability in any given PvE endeavor and non-competitive PvP. Blessing of Protection, not to be confused with Greater Blessing of Protection, returns on steroids. Get this, people. Same 5-minute cooldown, same 10-second, imagine I had a 10-minute duration, same 10-second duration, same function, immunity to all physical attacks. However, in BFA, Blessing of Protection also provides immunity to harmful effects. All I can say is, /oh my. I mean, that's pretty cool. I can hear Rets rejoicing and non-Rets drowning their pet goldfish. Great change for Rets. The defensive talent. An Eye for an Eye returns copy and paste from Legion. Shield of Vengeance returns. As I mentioned earlier, the damage part of that ability will improve as a result of the new mastery. Justicar's Vengeance is an offensive ability serving a dual function of restoring health. Nothing like restoring your health while you're maintaining offensive pressure. Keep in mind, Justicar's Vengeance does holy damage and benefits from the new mastery as well. Matter of fact, the entire tier 90 offers healing in one form or another. Justicar's Vengeance, Selfless Healer, Judgment, which reduces Flash of Light's cast time and increases the heal by 10%, and of course, Word of Glory, healing the 3 most injured friendly targets within 30 yards. As far as PvP talents go, Luminescence and Seraphim's Blessing offer value to a group as well as survivability for yourself. Luminescence, when healed by an ally, all allies within 20 yards are healed for 20%. So if you find yourself not receiving any heals in a BG or a dungeon, like I often do, Stand near a Ret Paladin. Seraphim's Blessing gives you an instant cast flash heal for 5 seconds when you drop, or anytime you drop below 40% health, which is kind of cool. There is a lot of survivability here. There's a lot in the bat utility belts for Rets. The key here is the choice of whether you benefit yourself or you pass that benefit to someone in your group. There will be situations that will call for both, and it takes an experienced paladin to know when to apply each. Overall, your effectiveness will really come down to timing and not wasting your CDs. Overall, I give survivability a solid 4.5. Mobility. This is kind of where the love story with the BFA version of Rets comes to a screeching halt. To be fair, from a PvP perspective, a spec really can't have unstoppable massive single target damage, great survivability, and great mobility. There needs to be some area of weakness in one of those three aforementioned areas, unless, of course, you're a Demon Hunter in Legion. There's always the exception to the rule or norm. That's not to say Ret mobility can't be improved or it shouldn't be improved. To do so, I think there needs to be a little bit of give and take. Maybe less single target damage, less survivability, but making that swap, it kind of all depends on what your preference of in-game mode is. For some Rets, they'll gladly make the swap, others will not. And that's kind of problematic, and that's where the divisiveness comes in. Ret's single baseline speed boost, Divine Steed, isn't that terrible. Here's the way it works. Leap atop your charger for 3 seconds with a speed boost of 100%. Keep in mind, if you do play a Tauren, Lightforged, or Janai Paladin, there are height limitations in certain dungeons and BGs that keep you from riding through certain doorways. For example, Warsong Gulch, the 2 Berserker huts, the 2 healing huts, the entrance to the Horde base, Alliance base, you cannot use your Divine Steed and ride through them on those 3 aforementioned races. It can't be done. Matter of fact, that's what led me to change my Paladin from a Janai to a human. The Talent Cavalier adds a second charge to Divine Steed. Unfortunately, it's kind of sometimes just not enough still. Obviously, Blessing of Freedom returns, and so does the PvP talent, Unbound Freedom, providing a 30% speed boost for 8 seconds. Now, the bottom line here, as a Ret, you do have a few decent speed boosts, and you do have a repertoire of snares, but you just don't possess the gap closers of any given melee in the game, including DKs. Gap closers like Death Grip, Shadow Step, Fell Rush, Charge, Heroic Leap, the list just goes on and on and on. You cannot stop any of those abilities with a snare. Maybe at one point in the game you could, but you can't now. And the problem with Rets is that for you to get from point A to point B, all you have is really a prayer. I mean, that's it. Yes, I do completely understand a carefully placed Blessing of Freedom can mitigate a snare, especially with good timing and good use, but that does not change the fact that every single melee possesses a better gap closer than Rets. Since I'm grading things based on how Rets compare with other melee specs, I give Rets a solid 2 for mobility. Gotta have some improvement here. Utility. This is an area where Rets can really shine and offer tremendous value to any given group. The passive ability Retribution is a very unique and underrated ability in a group setting. When a party or raid member dies within 40 yards of the Ret gains 20% increased damage and 30% reduced damage taken for 20 seconds. Now from now on, if and when I'm about to die, I'm going to do so at the shiny boots of the first Ret that I can find. Now I give myself a pass for not knowing this. Hopefully you guys will too, because throughout MoP, Warlords of Drain all the fun, Legion, I've chosen Holy over Ret. Not that I don't like Ret, it's just that Holy Paladin is the healer I feel most comfortable with. Blessing of Freedom and Protection offer tremendous utility, as does Greater Blessing of Kings and Wisdom. A wisely placed Lay on Hands can sometimes make or break a given group in casual PvP or even a raid or dungeon. I do believe one of the more underappreciated intrinsic abilities of a Ret is to call attention to themselves and take pressure off their teammates. They can do this by using a blessing or greater blessing of some kind at the right time. There is a bit of a learning curve here with a Ret. Timing is a huge factor with many of your CDs. Sure, you can step in and play a Ret, make some music as if you're playing a guitar, But to play like Hendrix or Jimmy Page, it takes a bit of repetition and it takes a bit of experience. And that is where you really need to start to develop a sense of timing, and this is where skill separates the good rets from the average. Cleanse can and will frustrate any given assassination rogue, as well as DK. As far as PvP talents, there's quite a bit of utility here. Vengeance Aura. If you or a nearby ally with your greater blessings within 40 yards is hit with a full loss of control effect, you gain 4% holy damage and crit strike for 4 seconds, stacking up to 4 times. Another ability benefiting you or an ally taking damage with greater blessings is Hammer of Reckoning. Once you acquire 50 stacks of Reckoning, you can deal a fair amount of holy damage to an enemy and gain Avenging Wrath for 6 seconds. So those are pretty huge underrated abilities there. Throughout the video, I talked about timing and not wasting CDs more than once. I said it a few times. If you put in the time and master your CDs, your utility is a solid 4. If you're new to the spec or you just don't care whether or not you play the guitar like Springsteen here, because the bottom line here, as a Ret, you can just kind of step in, do your thing, and get the job done. There's quite a bit there. But if you really want to play it well, I think there is a bit of a skill level, learning how to use, when to use your cooldowns, use it on yourself, use it on a teammate. Overall here, if you just kind of want to play it and have fun and not worry about being good, then I give utility a 3. So I guess you got to split the difference and say 3.5. This is Luxeley saying, whatever it is by you, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, make it epic.